Vikings, let's win the game.
Just when it felt like the Vikings were settling into the quiet part of the offseason, several storylines exploded all at once. A familiar name is being linked to Minnesota once again. A rookie is already earning serious praise. One of the team's most respected veterans is entering a critical contract year, and the quarterback debate refuses to slow down. If you're a Vikings fan, these next few weeks could shape a lot more than just the opening depth chart. There was one move this offseason that didn't grab as many national headlines as it probably should have, but the ripple effects are still being felt throughout this defense. When Jonathan Greenard was traded away during Day 2 of the 2026 NFL Draft, it wasn't just about moving a talented pass rusher. It was about changing the entire structure of Brian Flores' edge rotation. Greenard wanted a new contract after believing he had outplayed his previous deal, and you honestly can't blame him for betting on himself. Philadelphia certainly agreed, rewarding him with a 4-year, $100 million contract after sending Minnesota 2 third-round picks in return. From the Vikings' perspective, though, this became a calculated business decision. The team gained valuable draft capital, created salary cap flexibility, and officially handed Dallas Turner the opportunity that so many fans have been waiting to see. Turner now steps into a much bigger role, and there's plenty of excitement surrounding what he could become. But here's the part that keeps nagging at me. Behind Turner and Andrew Van Ginkel, the depth suddenly feels a whole lot thinner than it did just a few months ago. That's exactly why Leonard Floyd continues to surface as one of the most logical free agents available. Matthew Collar mentioned it earlier this week, and now Dustin Baker from Vikings territory is echoing the exact same idea. When multiple respected Vikings voices begin pointing toward the same player, it's worth paying attention. Floyd isn't the dominant force he was years ago, and nobody is pretending this would be some blockbuster signing. That's not the point. What makes this fit so interesting is everything surrounding it. Kevin O'Connell already knows exactly what Leonard Floyd brings to a locker room after spending time together during the Rams' Super Bowl season. That familiarity matters. Veterans who understand the coaching staff, the expectations, and the culture often transition much faster than outsiders. More importantly, Floyd would provide something this defense desperately needs after Greenard's departure: insurance. Every NFL season turns into a battle of attrition. Injuries happen, rotations get tested, young players hit rough stretches. If either Van Ginkel or Turner were forced to miss time, are we truly comfortable asking Bo Richter to suddenly shoulder a massive workload? That's a difficult position for any developing player. Bringing in Leonard Floyd wouldn't be about replacing Greenard. It would be about preventing one injury from creating a much bigger problem in the middle of the season. Sometimes championship-caliber teams aren't built through flashy signings. They're built through smart, experienced additions that quietly solve problems before they become disasters. And as training camp gets closer, I can't help but wonder if the Vikings front office is looking at this situation exactly the same way. One of the most exciting stories entering training camp isn't centered around a superstar or a proven veteran. Instead, it's about a player who hasn't taken a single regular season snap in the NFL yet, but already has fans wondering if he could become the next hidden gem in Brian Flores' defense. The Vikings took a chance in the 5th round when they selected Charles Demmings out of Stephen F. Austin, and plenty of people immediately questioned the level of competition he faced in college. That's a fair concern whenever a prospect comes from the FCS, but sometimes football isn't just about where you played. It's about the traits you bring to the field. Demmings checks a lot of boxes that Flores loves in his cornerbacks. He's long, he's physical, he's confident. Most importantly, he embraces playing tight press man coverage instead of backing away from receivers. That's becoming harder and harder to find in today's NFL. Matthew Collar recently predicted that Demmings could become this year's Mr. Mankato, an unofficial honor Vikings fans know very well. Every summer, there's always one under-the-radar player who suddenly starts making highlight plays every single practice. The crowd notices. The media notices. Before long, everyone is asking the same question. Could this guy actually make the roster and contribute? Collar believes Demmings has that kind of potential, and honestly, I can understand why. His athletic testing at the NFL Combine turned plenty of heads, showing the kind of movement skills that simply can't be coached. Sure, the technique still needs refinement. The jump from FCS football to lining up against Justin Jefferson every day in practice isn't exactly small, but sometimes those practice battles become the greatest classroom a young defensive back could ever ask for. Working under Brian Flores only makes the opportunity even more intriguing. Flores has built a reputation for maximizing defensive talent, especially players who thrive with aggression and physicality. He's never been afraid to trust young defenders if they prove they can handle the responsibility. Realistically, Demmings probably won't see a heavy workload during his rookie season. The Vikings have veterans ahead of him, and that's perfectly fine. Development doesn't always happen overnight. But looking ahead to 2027, the picture at cornerback becomes much less certain. Contracts expire, rosters change, new opportunities appear. If Demmings spends this season learning, growing, and flashing his potential whenever he's given the chance, he could position himself to compete for a much bigger role much sooner than anyone expects. Sometimes the future of a defense doesn't arrive with first-round hype. Sometimes it quietly walks into training camp wearing a fifth-round label, waiting for everyone else to finally notice what was there all along. As exciting as young talent can be, championship teams are built just as much by holding on to the veterans who have already proven they belong. That's why another conversation surrounding the Vikings deserves far more attention than it's receiving. While everyone debates quarterback competitions and roster battles, one of the most dependable players on this team is entering the final year of his contract. Brian O'Neill has been one of the cornerstones of Minnesota's offensive line for years, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to imagine this offense without him protecting the right side. Dustin Baker recently made a strong case that the Vikings shouldn't wait any longer to secure O'Neill's future, and I have to admit, it's hard to argue with that logic. Offensive tackles aren't like many other positions in football. Elite players at the position often continue playing at a high level well into their 30s because their success relies on technique, intelligence, consistency, and experience just as much as athleticism. O'Neill turns 31 soon, but nothing about his recent performances suggests he's beginning to slow down. Even during a season where the offensive line had its share of struggles, Pro Football Focus still graded him among the league's more reliable right tackles. That kind of consistency isn't something you casually replace through free agency or the draft. Reliable offensive linemen are incredibly difficult to find, and when you already have one in the building, letting him walk creates a problem that often takes years to solve. Baker even projected a reasonable extension of 3 years worth $66 million, and honestly, that feels like smart business rather than an emotional decision. The Vikings have invested heavily in building an offense capable of competing with anyone in the NFC. Whether it's Kyler Murray or J.J. McCarthy taking snaps this season, neither quarterback can fully succeed without stability up front. Great offenses begin in the trenches, and Brian O'Neill has quietly been delivering that stability year after year. Sometimes the smartest moves a franchise makes aren't the flashy ones that dominate headlines. Sometimes they're simply about rewarding players who consistently show up, do their job at a high level, and give the rest of the roster confidence every single Sunday. With training camp approaching, it wouldn't surprise me at all if this contract situation becomes one of the next major stories Vikings fans are watching closely. The toughest conversations are usually the ones nobody wants to have, and right now, there may not be a bigger question hanging over this franchise than what's happening at quarterback. Just a couple of years ago, the future seemed crystal clear. The Vikings traded up in the first round because they believed they had found their quarterback of tomorrow. There was excitement, there was patience, there was hope that everything would eventually come together. But the NFL has a way of changing narratives faster than anyone expects. Injuries stole valuable development time early in J.J. McCarthy's career, and when he finally got his opportunity, the consistency simply wasn't there. Now, instead of entering training camp as the unquestioned starter, he's fighting to keep control of a job many assumed would already belong to him. The pressure only intensified after the arrival of Kyler Murray. Suddenly, this isn't just about potential anymore. It's about production. It's about earning trust. It's about proving you deserve to lead a football team that's built to compete right now. National analysts are starting to lean heavily in one direction, and that's where things become uncomfortable for Vikings fans who have continued believing in McCarthy. NFL.com's Nick Shook recently predicted that Murray will win the starting job and rebuild his reputation under Kevin O'Connell. ESPN's Bill Barnwell praised Minnesota's decision to bring Murray in, calling it one of the smartest moves of the offseason because it gives the Vikings a legitimate answer if McCarthy can't take the next step. Then came another harsh opinion that added even more fuel to the conversation. Former NFL general manager Scott McCloughan compared McCarthy to players he believes are career backups, saying his ceiling is that of a QB2 rather than a long-term franchise quarterback. What made those comments sting even more was that McCarthy wasn't even the primary topic of discussion. His name simply came up as an example. Whether you agree with those evaluations or not, they're becoming harder to ignore because they all point toward the same concern. The league is beginning to question whether McCarthy can develop into the player the Vikings hoped they drafted. The good news is that outside opinions don't decide football games. Training camp does. Practices do. Preseason performances do. McCarthy still controls his own opportunity, but there's no denying the margin for error has become incredibly small. Every throw, every decision, every practice rep will be analyzed under a microscope. That's the reality of being a first-round quarterback in today's NFL. Maybe this competition brings out the very best version of him. Maybe Kyler Murray reminds everyone why he was once the first overall pick. Either way, one of the biggest storylines of the entire Vikings season is about to unfold, and it could shape the future of this franchise for years to come. No matter how all of these stories unfold over the next few weeks, one thing remains true. This team is entering one of its most fascinating training camps in years. There are veterans fighting to extend their legacy, young players trying to prove they belong, and a quarterback battle that could define the direction of the franchise. That's why this offseason feels so different. Every decision carries real weight. Now I want to hear from you. Which story has you watching the closest? Leonard Floyd possibly joining the defense, Charles Demmings' development, Brian O'Neill's contract, or the battle between Kyler Murray and J.J. McCarthy? Let me know down below. And as always, thank you for being part of this incredible Vikings community. We'll keep following every twist together. I'll see you in the next one. Stay tuned. SKOL Vikings, let's go.